I think SaaS is dead from the point of view of like, maybe we should be building the system of record for these companies to build on versus building out the exact SaaS layer.
Hello everybody, you are listening to Agents After Dark, powered by Prefactor. I'm Matt Doughty, CEO and co-founder of Prefactor.ai. As enterprises deploy more AI agents, one question becomes increasingly difficult to answer. How do you actually know what your agents are doing? Prefactor gives organizations a single place to see how their agents are behaving, whether they're performing as intended, where risk is emerging, and where action needs to be taken. I'm very excited to be joined today by Aaron from Buildpass. Aaron is the CTO and co-founder, a construction tech platform built here in Australia, but growing rapidly with a big go-to-market team over in North America, where their CEO, Matt, is based in Austin. Thank you so much for being with me today, Aaron.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm keen.
Awesome. So I guess just before the chat, we were talking a bit about kind of AI and how it affects kind of you and your business. And one of the things you mentioned was you've kind of taken AI by the horns and are now kind of moving from kind of being more of a maybe strategic founder to being a bit more on the tools as a result. Like, I'd be really keen to understand kind of your journey with AI and kind of what's brought you to the point today, just from a personal perspective, and then maybe we can talk a bit more about Buildpass.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think AI is kind of come at a funny time for a lot of founders, where if they're growing out a company, for context, Buildpass is about 65-ish people right now, and you get caught up in building the company, and you're stuck into meetings, and you're finding yourself a bit more time poor. And myself and the other co-founders and some of the early engineers, like, we were the ones that built everything from scratch at the start. This is all pre-AI too, so it's all handwritten artisanal code. Suddenly your craft becomes more so meetings, and AI, I think, hit me at a funny point where, like, I only had a few times before in between meetings I'd love to just fire off a prompt and get some stuff done, and that kind of like quickly itched that scratch the itch rather, where I could build things, or I could at least try things out, or if I had an idea I could like see what would come to fruition as well. And I think it really kind of like compounded, whereas like, I actually can do a lot of the things that I'm currently blocked on, or I don't have the time to do as well. I also have that technical expertise. Like, I know the systems in and out. It helps build them. And so that combination, I think there's a lot of like senior technical leaders, or even just senior founders out there that are probably finding the same thing, where they might not necessarily have a lot of context and not a lot of time, and AI is a really good conduit to firing off a bunch of these ideas. You quickly work out that maybe not every idea is a good idea, and that's perfectly fine, and they can live and die. But yeah, it's just a really good way for that to happen. And I find myself more and more leaning in, really enjoying getting back onto the tools, and probably now doing more coding than I probably have ever done combined in the previous years, before building even Buildpass as well. And just absolutely loving it as well. So it's kind of like, I think to like scratch the itch rather for like a founder that just wants to build stuff and wants to get out there, and AI is a fantastic conduit to that.
And so when you talk about kind of building, I mean, it almost feels like you could be getting under the feet of your engineering leadership team. Yeah. How do you manage that, kind of, given that obviously you've got the vision, you've got the ideas, you speak to the customers? How do you kind of ensure that you're not just getting in the way?
Genuinely, it is a really good question. I think that I have such an easy answer for that, and it is like, don't build in the same stack as them. Like, actually force yourself out, and that's ultimately what I ended up doing. Look, to be fair, like, every developer loves starting a fresh new thing, and I think a founder is no different from that as well. But I've kind of found that rhythm by not necessarily treading on the toes of the existing systems and trying out new, whether it be prototypes or building out new parts of the business. You can do that standalone now. I think the cost to actually spin up a whole app or a functionality feature is coming quite down to literal zero in terms of the cost itself to get it set up. And so the cost to restart something and also to throw it away is also it's quite minimal. So like, why not start again? Why not try some things out and just more explore? But it's also probably investing in the team as well. I think if the team builds at the same space and we're all on the same page, like, we can comfortably sit in the same repositories or applications and build on that too. So hopefully the team sees it as value add, but I'm sure there's a bit of a wrecking ball situation sometimes when it comes to some of the stuff that gets pushed in. So
yeah, that's really interesting. And so have you managed to build anything that has gone into production that is being used by customers today?
Yeah, so like random bits and pieces, like constantly. Yeah, like I think this idea of being able to convert, like you're on a customer call and you're hearing out pain points and then being able to fire off things actually to fix that. So there's a bunch of little paper cuts that I've had, that customers have had, and I kind of worked with them as part of my journey as a founder, and probably not necessarily building day to day. And I can do that because I'm not prescribed to I'm not working on a roadmap necessarily. I'm just kind of like more free flowing. But then more recently, not in production right this very second, but hopefully very soon, like we've essentially afforded building out brand new lines of business essentially using AI. So, for context, this is jumping into some of the background of Buildpass. Like we started in site operations and safety for construction. It's really important in Australia. In particular, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of red tape to kind of help cut through, and software is fantastic at that. And we expanded into site operations, we expanded into quality, we expanded into scheduling, and then we never really touched some of the pre-construction and some of the finance aspects, which is quite a lot, very complicated pieces that are quite big. Very much the SaaS companies that do all of that themselves. And so what I'm working on right now is actually building these out and actually using AI to help develop and really shorten those cycles as well. And that's about to go into production, hopefully end of this month, hopefully in June, July, hopefully it would be good. But that's a huge piece that's been solely pushed through with AI.
That's exciting. That's very exciting. I mean, I guess it's interesting, I guess, for everyone listening, like the context. I know Aaron through my previous life working at Procore, and if anyone's looked at the Procore stock price over the past few months, it's been painful reading. But I guess I'd be curious to understand your perspective. Obviously, you guys can build faster than ever before. You can do it with less resource than ever before. You're kind of able to sit with customers, understand what they need, whether that's a new feature, whether that's a bug, whatever it is, and fix that. Procore has done some fantastic job over the last 25 years to kind of build and often kind of lead the way when it comes to technology, but it does sound a little bit like the way you've just described how fast you can build as being almost like that archetypal example of, well, is SaaS dead? And how do we build our businesses like Buildpass going to eat Procore, Autodesk, and Connex's lunch? Like, what's your view on that in terms of, I mean, my theory is, why can't Procore do the same thing?
Yeah.
So,
and I think,
I guess they
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's different. I think, like we can do the things that we can do because of the size and the constraint that we are. We're also very capital constrained compared to, say, Procore, and we can't hire an incredible team that they have as well. They've got some incredible engineers and product and design folk as well. So I think, like, for me, I don't think it's black and white, unfortunately, as SaaS is dead, as much as that kind of might help and in some certain cases as well. I think this idea of there's going to be a mix of realities, like where, like we do play in a slightly different bucket to, say, Procore. We're not necessarily in the big tier one builders and folk, but I'm not sure if a big tier one builder would necessarily want to go to, not necessarily Buildpass, but a quickly kind of vibe coded solution out there in the market. And again, it's not saying that what we do, we kind of pride ourselves on quality, but I feel like this idea of some SaaS is dead. I feel like we can, companies can build their own tools now. We have customers literally building tools on top of Buildpass or instead of Buildpass in certain areas. And I think that part is quite interesting to help support them. And I think SaaS is dead from the point of view of, like, maybe we should be building the system of record for these companies to build on versus building out the exact SaaS layer, like, trying to guess or trying to work about building it, for instance, a dashboard that solves every customer's needs. Like, how about we just give them the tools, MCP or whatever, for them to actually be able to build that on top of that. All the way through to, like, there's a lot of people that, like, I'm still going to pay for certain SaaS. I'm still going to probably pay for our HubSpot. I'm still going to pay for Slack. There's still so much core SaaS in our lives. And I think, like, it's all easy. I'm sure we could, if we had Fable, we could probably fire off a prompt to build Slack, but why? What's the point? Like, where's your time and cost and value? And I think for construction companies, they have to understand, like, where's their expertise lie and what can we do as a software provider to help that out. Software construction companies are going to be hiring people like AI operations folk. Like, that's going to be like a new role, I think, coming to every business out there. And they're going to be looking at tools. And so I look at more like, how can we build those tools? And Procore will do exactly the same thing. I think it's a up market for everyone involved that wants to kind of lean in a bit. As long as, don't actively go against the builders and actually help support the builders is what's really important.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about building the tools that people can build themselves. I guess, like, being in a space like construction, I think I always used to get quoted at Procore the McKinsey thing that said that construction was one of the least technologically kind of developed industries in the world, which I don't know whether I've truly believed that stat from McKinsey. But what you're talking about is enabling people to build on top of your own tools or to leverage AI to do that. I guess be really keen to understand, like, what are you seeing? Obviously, you've got a big go-to-market team out in the States, and my assumption is always that US-based companies tend to be slightly more advanced innovatively when it comes to technology than maybe in Australia. Maybe that's the wrong assumption. But like, what are you seeing in terms of these organizations? Are they building with AI, or is it still, that's too scary, I need to push that into the future?
Yeah, I think so. We play in the mid-market, which is, I think, a really hot, interesting space. Like there is companies that are like forging ahead. Like they have AI operations people inside of their business. They're building on the latest stuff. I think if you have, it's kind of a funny one, but if you've got people in construction asking you for an MCP server or asking you for stuff like that, as a tech company, you kind of feel like you've lost the battle here when it comes to actually winning this race. But I would say, like we're being pulled by some of our customers, specifically, at least from Australia, from my proximity to being here. We've got, we had a customer, we just actually relaunched our MCP server, and this customer said, "That's fantastic. We've actually already built one around your API already for you." So we've got customers wanting for us to train them up, like we're doing now, kind of more services stuff, and helping them actually transition their company, think about how they use AI internally, to the point of like there's probably a business in there in itself, like helping other companies, especially construction. So I think there's a broad scale. From my rough feel, it's like Australia is just as I think interested in some of the AI stuff and into tech stuff as the US. I just think we just have less saturation here. Like there's just less tools, less availability, less stuff out there. So they kind of get what they get given, and often that might be a pretty powerful ChatGPT or a Claude Sub, which is still fantastic. So, but they don't have like the ecosystem around that necessarily. So, but it is crazy to have non-technical people in construction kind of like asking you about like, hey, can this MCP server do this and do that and whatnot, and you're kind of like, like we're in some ways ahead and some ways behind when it comes to some of these pieces.
I mean, I think MCP is still super early in its journey. I think we were involved with it about 6 to 12 months ago, and I remember speaking to people and them going, "What the hell is MCP?" So I mean, that's an amazing story. And I mean, would this be like an IT manager that would be asking that question? You'd be going into like.
This is a director. This is a non-technical director asking about stuff. So in this case, as a non-technical director of a mid-sized commercial builder. But like typically we don't work. Our size of the businesses are kind of like working directly with the directors or founders or the site team. We don't tend to work with a heap of IT kind of folk as well. And I think in some ways, like that's probably why it's also going a bit faster, because probably the slightly bigger companies that have the IT teams, like there is just a bit more, not necessarily resistance, but there's a bit more like red tape, there's a bit more unpacking, and which is, to be fair, very fair in this day and age of AI, which is going quite quick, understanding what's actually safe and what's actually reasonable. But now I think it's kind of like this. The directors out there probably feel the same pressure as founders do, of like, oh my God, this is new technology. I feel like I'm not doing enough. Probably that FOMO in some regards. And they're just probably Googling what they need to do or asking ChatGPT out there. And so, like, I think there is a really good, like, how can we directly connect with these people that want to pull themselves in this direction and actually understand or learn, or just a lot of them are just curious. Like they're so used to being able to have to do everything themselves. They're just like, okay, well, what is this AI thing? I need to learn it and jump in. So
yeah, wow. I mean, that's good to hear. I think obviously companies like Procore and Autodesk are investing heavily in this space, so I guess they must see kind of an opportunity. I guess just kind of taking a step back and just talking about kind of the organization and just how you are applying AI. I mean, construction is an unusually hard environment for kind of AI and agents. You've got data that's spread across so many different resources, whether it's drawings, site diaries, etc. How do you create the right and enough context for the agents that operate within your platform to actually provide intelligent output?
Yeah, it's weirdly like it's a area that AI probably can thrive in, but it's probably like a bit harder to initially apply. There's so much context you need to unpack with construction, like safety and quality and previous known items, and there's so much data, and so kind of sifting through that. The way we initially started Buildpass's journey on this is actually kind of like picking very finite things, very small encapsulated processes, like just extracting out context from an image, like what's in this image, so I can now do better searching on that image, and show me all of the ones where an elevator work platform was on site, and I can unpack that all the way through to a big thing in construction is paperwork. Everything runs on paperwork. So Buildpass early days built out a system to digitize that, and that was obviously very manual, drag and drop stuff in. The best thing, that AI can build out generative blocks. It can take in a form of a PDF and convert it. And so we applied this almost like this encapsulated, very rigid, almost deterministic flow of like AI initially. And that is very useful because it just speeds things up. But where AI becomes quite useful is when it's not so capped and it's not so constrained. It's like, free flowing. It's the chat like a version of things. And we're only just getting to that now. We just kind of launched out some of our own version of our chat plus an MCP server that allows them to connect into that. And I feel like the reason it's taken us so long is because we want to kind of perfect it, not just perfect it, but like it's like, how do you make it like useful? How do you make it actually kind of work within the system? Like what context do you pull in? And only recently did the models in terms of tool usage and context size get to the point where it can do things effectively, repeatedly, deterministically, like especially when you're talking about safety and construction. You don't want to suddenly fib about this stuff and hallucinate some of this stuff. And so, it's been a real eye-opener. I think AI immediately works well for that small 20% of use cases, but then as you start to go broader, when it becomes less deterministic, which is the whole point of AI, it became a bit harder, or became a bit like not as straightforward to implement, and actually be able to, like, I guess in some ways, like explain that to our users. Like, a lot of these construction folk are wanting, they paid for X, they want to get X, and so how do you explain to them that, like, how AI would necessarily kind of work within that system of, like, if you want them to be able to, like, who's on site today, and like, do they have the right qualifications? Like, how does that work for them? Actually, kind of help explain that and actually kind of get them to value that level of flexibility as well, which has been a more recent push for us.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously one of the challenges with construction is, we're often talking about life and death, but obviously you've got drawings which are designed to be exactly the way they are. And I mean, how do you introduce non-deterministic AI into construction when ultimately you're handing off ownership of a decision or a bit of information to AI? Yeah,
and this is one of the most important things to necessarily get right, or at least the way that we position ourselves is that human in the loop really does need to always be there, especially when it comes to some of these pieces. Like quite literally, construction safety is life and death, and it's not something that we should be playing with like just willy nilly. And like the idea of, like, even a construction drawing, if you get that wrong, that could result in significant variation cost and defect qualities as well. So we've always built in the idea of, like, AI helps get the data pre-filled, or at least like it pulls things out, but it's this idea of, like, a human is in the loop. We don't have no multi-step AI approach on purpose. Like, AI is not passing, it's not generating something and then passing it off behind the scenes. It's always, if it's generative, it's shown to the user, they can kind of scan it and they can kind of go through that. It's obviously then relying on that user to review that as well. But the way that it's been built through approval steps and everything, is like the whole idea is, like, we don't want to necessarily remove humans. We just want to make the jobs a lot easier. We see the idea of, like, how can we make that safety consultant or that quality consultant more effective to be able to pick up other things that they wouldn't have even seen before, that actually even decrease that likelihood of an on-site accident or a defect as well. So for us it's literally just don't make assumptions, don't kind of combine results, and don't always show the user. I think the idea of getting that human in the loop is so important with AI. We've stuck to that, but how AI is evolving, it's quite interesting to see people do very hands-off, away from keyboard kind of approaches to AI. But for us, the risk is just too great for us to personally kind of have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I was chatting with a news organisation just 2 days ago, and the challenge that he was talking about was he's got journalists that want to be able to review information faster. So the question isn't that you need fewer journalists, it's that actually you need more journalists, because now you can access way more information and you still need kind of a human to essentially pass that information. And so the way that they were looking at it was multi-step process with a Python code script that essentially ran inside the agent so that you could see each step, and then every single step required a fact checker, who would then go on off and do non-agentic work to come back and then move forward to the next step. And I guess there's not a lot of talk around those type of environments where, you know, journalism is an extremely important part of our kind of day-to-day and our culture. And the assumption being that, you know, if everyone just used AI, then why would you need journalists? But actually, it's the same with construction, because you can't replace 20 years of knowledge with AI, but you can make their job slightly easier. But then really it comes down to trust, though, because whether or not you are kind of dealing with an autonomous agent in construction or whatever, like ultimately it comes down to how do you trust that agent? And so how do you trust that agent? And I mean, this might go down the technical route, but you know, if you are introducing any level of non-deterministic behavior, trust is the number one problem. So how do you solve for the trust problem?
Yeah, it's a really important thing right now. I think it's like the risk factor, also like the scaling risk factors. Like not everything needs as much high trust. Like if I talked about before about like extracting, you know, context from an image, like you probably, you know, don't necessarily care, batch it, push it out there as well. But when it comes to like, you know, assessing drawings and actually helping kind of pull out potential issues, you'd probably want a very skilled, you know, architect or someone to kind of go through that and actually unpack that. And I think the way that like the more obvious answer for this building trust is like, you know, evaluations or evals as well, I think. But I think often those only go so far. Like, you know, there's scorecards from the latest state of the art models out there. Always use the latest models where possible. Have your own evals. But building in a way that, like, I think that like the confidence score, like don't treat everything back to the user as 100% right. Like, as in if and it's about positioning. It's like, you know, I think it's perfectly fine, and people are getting used to the idea of, hey, like I think this is it. I have a 50% confidence rating, or I think no, I'm 100% certain in here's why, and evidence as well. I think it's really quite important. So when we've all probably gone on the building trust with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever by using it heaps and heaps and seeing kind of like that value being built up and learning kind of like the quirks, whereas our users, like, they're having to learn. It's a separate system, and so we trying to provide as many kind of key factors, like providing sources, providing kind of links, allow them to have their own deterministic approach to kind of approving or rejecting that, and building that trust up over time is quite important as well. And then there's the concept of reinforced learning, like the idea of being able to actually give us a scorecard back in return of like how did our AI go with some of these pieces, which is quite important. I feel like that's where a lot of that moat will be building up with these companies. Is the more we all use ChatGPT or Claude, we're all collecting probably like very thin layers of like reinforcement learning data that we can then use to optimize our execution, whether it be prompts or actually modifying some of the underlying models as well.
So I'm going to come back to that because it's a really interesting point. But going back, you were talking about kind of the way people trust ChatGPT and that journey people have gone through. I mean, how do you classify kind of low risk versus high risk actions within the agents that you've got working?
I think like we have this like internal mantra anyway when it comes to not even just like AI, but it's the idea of like a two-way or one-way door. Like when it comes to manipulating data or potentially burning trust or anything to do with safety, it's like very much a one-way door. You want to make sure that you're applying kind of slower safeguards around that. But I think it's about unpacking kind of like it's literally the idea of like asking yourself, if something was to go wrong here, like what's the impact analysis of that, and actually unpacking kind of like that matrix of things as well, and doing that on a micro feature, but also bundling that up as well, and then you can use that to quickly build that. But I feel like where you've got to like test it and use it yourself and like know the limits and actually be a bit more of a leader in it internally before you can start applying it out there, just randomly stamping AI everywhere if you don't personally know how to use it. And I think that's been a big learning for us internally, is like upskilling our entire team, be better about using AI. Then we know how to then present it back and actually share those insights back to our customers through the tools. And then knowing what's a one-way door, what's a two-way door, what's important for us to put safety guards around, what's important we don't care about, and actually probably explaining those risks as well to the user where possible in context.
Is there anything that you would never allow an agent to do autonomously?
Right. Yeah, quite a few things. I don't necessarily like off the top of my head, like obviously like directly manipulating the database and customer data as well. Like again, everything needs to be traceable. Like, for compliance reasons, for any reasons as well. Like we need a system of record to be able to be, immutable and come back to, so that they know that like this system was in this state, what forms or what credentials did this worker have when they came on the site that one time. Like we need that to be pretty secure for our customers. And so it doesn't have to be even AI. I think the idea of like, we put so much pressure on AI being perfect, but we also have like, we're also imperfect humans as well. And so I think the idea of, I apply the same rules as I would to say maybe a junior engineer or maybe a junior person in our team. It's like, I'm not going to give that person direct prod access to manipulate customer data either. But with high trust and with learning with capabilities and safety nets and those procedures around that, we'll start to kind of loosen those kind of those grips around the controls, doing that in a way that we can observe. And so, yeah, I'm of the opinion of like, the good AI, like I've used OpenClaw and I've used those systems like that, which are pretty, the reason why they're so useful is because they're doing some pretty scary stuff. Like they're in your emails and whatnot, but there are safe ways to go about all of that. And there's safe ways to unpack that. But I think the number one thing is for you to understand, like, there was a bunch of breaches with people that were using, say, OpenClaw, not because OpenClaw is innately a non-secure system. It's just because people didn't understand the whys and whats. And unfortunately, we're in this day and age where we still need to understand enough technical aspects of what we're building, how we're using it to protect ourselves and to protect our customers and to protect our team as well. That will eventually loosen up, I think, as AI gets better and the tools around us get more mature as well. So yeah, it's an always a changing thing. I think who would have thought that like today, using Claude Cowork or whatever, like we're all connecting our emails, we're all connecting our Slacks as well, and that would have seemed probably pretty scary a year ago, but now it's so useful for us and there's good enough controls around that we're pretty happy with that. So
well, I mean, it's funny you should say that, because I was chatting to a well-known Australian enterprise not that long ago, and I was asking them about their AI journey, and they'd hired a head of AI risk, they'd hired a head of AI compliance. They were using Copilot, everyone's favourite AI, and I was like, okay, so what can your Copilot do? Like, what can it access? What databases? And they're like, oh no, it can't access anything internally. I was like, well, so what are you actually risk managing? It's like, oh no, we're putting in place the systems so that in the future we can connect it up to these different, whether that's emails. I mean, this was literally locked down to its core. There was no connectors, there was no MCP servers. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like an interesting approach to AI. So I guess to your point that we are happy connecting up to Google and Slack and stuff. Yep. And I think that actually a lot of companies, and I suspect some of your customers, wouldn't be happy with that. I guess just coming to back to your product, I guess more generally than AI, I think, in construction, like a confident mistake can really affect.
Yes.
And we hear about this a lot, about safety, compliance, cost to schedule, whatever. What evidence do you look for, need, before graduating an action kind of in the agent from kind of always ask to that kind of trust, we trust the agent to do it? And I guess you talked a bit about that journey into trust, but I guess specifically from your agent inside your platform, like how do you make that decision?
I think, there's multi-levers here. Like there's certain systems and tools out there. We put it out there. We see kind of failure rates. We collect some data in terms of like how did it go processing, kind of what was it doing. And I think the idea of like for low risk stuff, like we've kind of just naturally kind of graduated it. But I think not every tool should always get that graduation step, or at least provide controls for it. And we're seeing that even with like MCP servers and in general tools that you can connect in with Cowork or whatever. That Anthropic still very much allows that very granular control for the end user. And we're moving to this world where how do we do that in a way that's smart and safe and easy to use, not convoluted, so that the end user can control that. Like we've got a wide range of customers that probably some that are a bit more willy-nilly with the data and kind of see they just want like that ROI. They just want to like throw everything at AI, paste in that and get the results back. Whereas others, like they're still on that journey of trusting and learning and growing with it as well. And they have maybe some risk adverse or the different appetites. And I think allowing them to have that control is quite important. So we're moving the system to like necessarily us making that decision for them and allowing them to make that decision. Like, do you want that autonomously to be done? Do you want to auto accept, or do you want to accept that? And it's the same treatment that Claude Cowork and ChatGPT and Codex, etc., give to us as well. Like we have that fine-grained control, as long as it's done without a convoluted mess of controls everywhere that makes it actually harder and less compliant as a result of it being too hard. And people go accept all because it's too hard. It's kind of like how we started with Claude Code, and everyone just did dangerously accept permissions because it was just so annoying to be constantly accepting it. And then both systems, have now brought out auto mode, which is a much safer alternative version of that, which is, the probably the better solution. So it's the same thing for us. It's like, how do we simplify this down to our end users without making assumptions on how they want to do that, but do it in a way that's not scary or over the top for them, so they actually understand.
That is really interesting because I have direct experience with just pressing yes, and as a non-engineer I don't understand most of the stuff that I'm saying yes to, hence why I'm not in our product repos. That's really interesting. I mean, but what you're essentially doing then is you are delegating trust, or you're delegating the responsibility for trust for some of this stuff to your users, in the same way as Claude was delegating responsibility to us to say yes to all of these things. How do you judge the kind of confidence level that someone might have? Because, I mean, I know I would just say yes. Construction's a bit different, and maybe I wouldn't just say yes. But you have to obviously assume that people understand what that means when they're saying yes. How do you understand that question from your guys' perspective?
Yeah, again, this is probably the ever-evolving thing because, what yes means is, it's very different to a lot. So I think it's honestly, it's trial by fire, trying to learning things out. Like, we've had customers, the agent will be like, do you want to remove this or delete this? And they go, yes. And then it deleted it and they go, why did it delete it? And it's like, it's because it said it. So this idea of like, we have to actually, unfortunately, but we have to actually be safer, and we have to do extra care and explaining that stuff and doing things like rollbacks as well. Like we're working on a live system. Like, for the most point, if you think about Claude Code, when it's working in code bases or even chat, like, the mistakes of it going wrong in those environments, that's sometimes disastrous if there's tools connected to that. But at the most point, you can just undo what they did. Like you can just undo that change or commit. You could just ignore that change to that text piece there as well. And so when you're then applying that generative framework to a live system where it's, you've got data and you're actually deleting things, like you do need to provide extra gates. You need to explain some stuff. You need to potentially allow that rollback as well to happen. We've had people, like the whole idea of AI agents is that we can upload documents and we'll work out where you want to put it. And even if we explain to them like this is what's going to create it as well, they might be like, oh, actually, I want that to be removed. And so, it's just like, for us, it's going the extra mile and actually deeply explaining kind of like the side effects and then always providing an escape hatch and always allowing them to kind of go, actually, what that just did is actually pretty bad. So how do I undo that as well? And to be fair, we learned that from making some initial mistakes. And unfortunately, for like all internal data, we were all testing it out where we manipulated some data and we're like, oh, it did exactly what it said it did, and actually it deleted it, and now I want it back. So how do I undo that kind of thing? And it's just not as easy as that. So we've put in a lot of extra care around those tools so that actually they're hopefully even easier. Like the same mistakes will be made by people using the software normally, but we can actually go beyond that and actually build in extra mechanisms. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I said to come back to it. So you talked a bit earlier about kind of learning loops and ultimately kind of what we would describe as quality management. I'd love to understand a bit more about kind of how you structure that. So how do you go from kind of agent runs, you learn the outcome, you've obviously run evaluations, you've already mentioned that, you've obviously got some level of qualitative mechanism that customers can say yes, no, maybe so. How do you structure your quality loop and that kind of continuous learning to improve, whether it is your prompt management, whatever it is that you are using within your agentic system? Yeah,
I'd say like it's ever changing. I don't think we're necessarily nailing it, and it's like there's a lot to go out there. I think a lot of the times, I think a lot of companies, there's something. It's like it's important what all of you just mentioned, but like given that the improvements that on like the month-on-month improvements for state-of-the-art models, like what you're actually capturing with potential reinforcement learning data is actually very minimal when it comes to what the actual improvement of the underlying models are and the harnesses around that. And so we traditionally hadn't done an amazing job in the space of like kind of capturing that data and probably doing a bit more of that reinforcement, or rather probably the eval stuff there. And that's been okay. That's been perfectly fine. But I do think we're moving back towards this idea of like the data that you can collect is a bit of your moat. And I don't mean it necessarily as I'm not going to go and train my own, Opus or Fable model by any means, but using that data, you can actually kind of build a better prompt, and you can actually do, instead of you as a human building a prompt, you can actually use AI. So here's this input, here's the eventual output of what they actually accepted in the system. Like, let's actually do a bit of a loop here and actually get to that point as well. So we're early days, but we're starting to capture a bit more of that data of like, what was the intent and what was the actual outcome, regardless if they even used AI. So the idea of like, as I mentioned, uploading a construction form, a PDF, and then eventually they will have a digitized version of that. They might use AI to start that, but what were the tweaks and edits they made after? What are the handcrafted stuff that they did, had done after this as well? And I think like for us, like that's an interesting data layer. And again, we're not going to train a model with that, but we're going to probably tweak how things work, and that'll be then used as like potential eval tests in the future of like, okay, as in a contrived example, ChatGPT 5.5 always means that we have to tweak the form this way, but suddenly, Fable's come out and it's actually fixed all of those problems. We don't have to retweak it, and it's we're seeing higher acceptance rates, and that's probably more what I care about today. Just with like our position as a company, if I had the money, I might reinforce, learn, and train my own models off open weight, but it's not something that you have to have a lot of data for that as well. So I think that's much more important. Is like trying to capture the intent and the actual outcome, regardless of AI or not.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess really what I'm trying to understand from everyone I speak to is, when you do get agentic drift, whether that's because models change or because underlying things change within the model, or whether the models literally change, how do you avoid that? Because I guess, again, coming back to what you do, construction safety is so important. Any level of drift can really affect what's going on. How do you catch that before it happens?
Yeah, and this is like... This happens drift within your own, like, thinking about development life cycles. And, if I'm coding with an agent, I will use, like, you build up these paper cuts or this drift of, like, things that it's not doing. And you might dump that into, like, what's called, like, the agents.md file and whatever. And so it's kind of a funny thing where every time you build up this list of like things like that it doesn't do, you almost unfortunately have to forget that when the next model comes through and reapply new tests each time. So I don't have like the golden answer here necessarily, but that for me, it's always having your own evals, like personal, like, and sometimes those can just be vibes, but a lot of the time it's like, I think record those frustrations or record those deltas or those drifts and actually like properly, because like that eval, and as we've talked about, like the evals as moat, like the whole idea of like what are the tests that you have internally that determine if a model is good or bad, like that becomes your moat as a company. And I think that's quite important to kind of expand on this idea of if you suddenly have a model smashing out of the park with some of these things, like only you know about it, or only you can use it through the unique ways that you manipulate that through prompts or whatever tool you use, like you should reinforce and double down on that. And so every time I have a frustrated moment internally as I'm building with AI, I'll document that through either tools or manually just dump down like, hey, I gave it this prompt, it didn't do it, and then when the next model comes out, I'll try it and see if it fix that issue, and if it did, and I'm like, okay, well, like now I know I can not steer it that way, or I don't have to kind of like add that extra kind of like context as well as these models get smarter and more harder as well. So I do think the concept of evals to some description, they don't have to be as formal as people think they are, will actually become much more part of like to day to day and the mode of a company. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I mean, that's definitely a clip I'm going to take from that. Is evals are a moat for your company, and actually, if everyone that uses the same models, then technically you get the same output, but actually, it's the learnings you get from how the model interacts with the data that you've got and the activities that the user is doing in your platform that can really make the difference. And that's really insightful. Thank you very much.
And again, I would say like the evals, like that people think of like, oh my God, it has to be some sort of like eval harness and testing loops, and they have to like this output, like it can literally just be like a vibe check or whatever. Like that is like, I think in some ways that is an eval. It's just how you weight that can be very different depending on the outcome as well. So we test out new models all the time. Every time a new model comes out, like, a part of your evals have your engineering team or your founders or your directors like jump on those new models, test them out. play with them, like that is part of that personal eval phase as well. So yeah, it can be as strict or as simple as you want it to be.
Yeah, fair enough. This is the challenge that we're trying to solve for. So, yeah, it's a good one. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I feel like that time's gone really, really fast.
It did, yeah.
It's been great to kind of hear about your journey and where you guys are at with AI. And it sounds like you're full throttle and you guys are going really well. So, yeah, great to hear from you. Great to chat.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.